Over the past 75 years, more than 10,000 chemicals have entered our food supply, but the EU allows just 300 additives. At Thrive Market, we prioritize quality, banning over 1,000 ingredients found in conventional grocery stores. Our Healthy Swap scanner helps you find better versions of your pantry essentials without the junk, dyes, or fillers, and everything is delivered right to your doorstep. So shop at a grocery store that actually cares about your health at thrivemarket.com/getstarted for 30% off your first order and a free $60 gift.
Go.
It's the Opperman Report. Join digital forensic investigator and PI Ed Opperman for an in-depth discussion of conspiracy theories, strategy of New World Order resistance, high-profile court cases in the news, and interviews with expert guests and authors on these topics and more. It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman, and this show is brought to you by emailrevealer.com. You go to emailrevealer.com, you can order an autographed copy of my book, How to Become a Successful Private Investigator. But also, too, we have all different kinds of services on there and searches, adoption investigations, online infidelity investigations, asset searches, criminal background checks. Check out emailrevealer.com. Okay, we got a great guest today. As a matter of fact, I think for the fans of this show, I think we've struck gold. Okay, all the stuff we love. We got Jack O'Halloran, famous stellar boxer of Fort George Foreman, Ken Norton, when boxing's heyday. Acted with Robert Mitchum in one of those Philip Marlowe movies. Superman. He was Non in Superman. One of my favorite movies is Dragnet. He was Emil Munz, I think it was. Something like that. In Dragnet. Actor, boxer, and his dad was Albert Anastasia. And I often talk about that story about where I used to get my my beard trimmed down at the Sheraton Hotel. Jack O'Halloran, are you there?
Yeah, hi. How are you today?
Great, man. Great. I'm really excited. I'm looking forward to this. Tell us about who is Jack O'Halloran today. Let's not get into the whole history of Jack O'Halloran yet. What's Jack O'Halloran doing today?
We have a book that we've written that we're about to develop into films and television series that we're going to put together. And then we've got 3 more books that we're in the process of writing. So we're staying pretty busy, actually, to be honest with you.
Yeah, one of the books we're going to be talking about today is Family Legacy, and you can find that at the website familylegacythenovel.com. Now, but Jack, you're 74 years old. You don't take it easy at all? You're still working 100% like you've always been?
Yeah, it's just somebody said to me, don't you know the word retirement? I said, what is that? I have no idea.
So, yeah, I could tell because every time I call you up, you're busy. You got meetings all day long. You got things going on. God bless you, man. I tell you, because I'm 55 and I'm ready for a nap. Okay, I really am. Today I'm ready for a nap. Right now, doing this show. Okay, let's start off with this. Your dad was Albert Anastasia. I guess that was the Gambino family, right?
Well, it was his family that turned into the Gambino family. Gambino, tenant of his. So it became the Gambino family, yeah.
And how did you find out that your dad was Albert Anastasia?
It was a sequence of events and things were happening around me that I saw these 3 people at a football game of mine when I was a kid, right before he was assassinated, and then I was taken under thumb by Meyer Lansky and Frank Costello and some people in New York, and I was given quite an education.
So how old were you when you found out?
14.
And that was after he was killed or before?
That was right after.
Okay, so you never actually got a chance to meet Albert Anastasia? No,
never really. I saw him, like I said, at a football game.
Okay.
I thought these guys were scouts, and because they were dressed more particularly than anybody else that was there. So it was kind of they stood out like a sore thumb, you know.
Yeah, I can imagine. Now, so you're 14 years old. Now, how did this come about? Like, because you have a different last name and stuff like that. So this was like an illicit affair type of thing?
Yeah, it was an affair. My father was stationed at Indian Gap, Pennsylvania, in World War II, and he was when they were looking for him everywhere. In fact, it's kind of an amusing story. They were looking for him everywhere. It was right after they had executed Louis Lipke, and he was like the number one guy on the hit parade because of Murder Incorporated. And he was in Indian Gap in the Army teaching soldiers how to be longshoremen because he controlled all the docks. And there was a captain of his platoon who called the New York police and said, you guys are looking for this Albert Anastasia guy all over the place. He's right here in my army. And the guy said, what are you talking about? He said, this guy I'm reading about, Albert Anastasia, that you're all looking for, he's right here in our army right here. And the guy said, well, hold on a second. And he came back on the phone. And he said, that's all bullshit. We're not looking for Albert Anastasia. That's a mistake. I mean, that's the kind of power that they had,
A couple of questions for you. Now, Albert Anastasia, he wasn't even an American citizen, was he?
No. In fact, when he came into America, he came off the ship and came into Brooklyn because he couldn't go through Ellis Island because he had a problem in Italy. So they brought him into New York, and the first incident that he was actually large incident where he killed a guy on the Brooklyn docks to sort some problems out, and they put him in prison, and it was in Sing Sing on death row. And they a year later, his lawyers got him a brand new trial somehow. And when he came out for the trial, there were no more witnesses, so they had to let him go. But they never deported him.
Okay. Now, and when he was in the military, was he had officer status?
He was a sergeant.
Sergeant.
He was a sergeant teaching longshoremen how to be teaching soldiers how to be longshoremen. And he never spent a night at the Army barracks. He was down in Philadelphia all the time. So he had some factories, dress factories, and stuff over in Hazleton, Pennsylvania. He had several businesses there while he was there. So he spent a lot of time in Philadelphia. And my mother and he got involved, and I was a product of it. So
now. I know there's a story about Albert Anastasia that he was helping with the war effort, right? But is this a known story that he was working down there training?
Oh yeah, they were. In other words, what it was about was they were. Charlie Luciano was in jail, and there was a activity going on down on the New York docks from Germany. The Germans were doing a lot of. There were submarines that were right off of our coastline, and the submarines were getting information about convoys that were floating down past America, going into the war effort before we were even in the war. So the Army went to Meyer Lansky and begged for help, how to stop the information leaking out of the harbors, and Meyer said that. They went to my father, they went to Meyer, and they said, there's only one guy that can help you, and that's Charlie Luciano, and you got him in jail. And so they made a deal, and they went up and saw Charlie, and Charlie, it's a funny story, they put out an order, Charlie put an order out to the head Sicilian fisherman saying he wanted to see him, and the guy said, Charlie Luciano, the hell with Charlie Luciano, but in essence, and one night, the guy was sitting at his kitchen table with another guy across the table who was the number one Nazi spy in the country, and they both got whacked. So they ended it right there, but that didn't stop. They wanted to get Charlie out of jail, so there was a lot of things that happened down at the docks, and then the last thing they did was they blew up the ship down there. That then they blamed it on the Germans.
Now, I'm from New York, right? So I'm kind of familiar, with this stuff. And I've had friends who's, they grew up in different families and stuff like that, and their dads got killed, and they look out for them as they're coming up. Now, is that kind of what happened with you?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So describe that. What did they give you to do?
Well, I just got a very stern education, that, which I've spelled out pretty much in the book. And, they taught me a lot of things, what to do, what not to do, how to avoid this and that. And you're talking about, having a father who was one of the most powerful men in the country. So they knew he already set aside the fact that where I was, who I was, and had some people around me. There was a man by the name of Rip Collins, who is in my book as well, and he was a first cousin to Michael Collins, the famous Irish, Republican Army guy, and he was a top engineer at General Electric, and he was the head of the IRA in Philadelphia. But because of the docks down there, he was very close to my father. So he was a minder of mine when I was very young, and looked after me really carefully, and then prepared me for what was coming. So when my father was assassinated, I was introduced to some people, and I became very friendly with a lot of good people, and they sort of steered my life.
Now, what about, because growing up, this was in New York or Philadelphia? Where'd you grow up?
Philadelphia.
Philadelphia, okay. Now, ultimately, the man who killed your father was Vincent the Chin Gigante. He was a boxer back then. They went to prison for a while, came out. He became the head of the Genovese family. And they walked around in the bathrobe and mumbling to himself to keep himself out of jail.
The Chin had nothing to do with my father's death.
Wait, your father, that wasn't the Chin who shot your father?
No. The Chin shot Frank Costello.
Oh, okay. Get out of here. Okay, then who shot your dad?
The Chin shot. He was from the Genovese family,
right?
And he was he shot Frank Costello in an Frank was coming out of an elevator, and he was so nervous that he moved his hand and he only creased his head. My father was already dead. That was the second person that they took a shot at, because the Genovese wanted to bring heroin into America. Father didn't want it to come through the ports. They killed Albert because Albert controlled all the ports of America, and he did not want to go in the heroin business. He said, we did not sign up for that. When you see The Godfather, and Brando gets approached, and Brando says, if we touch it, our children will touch it. It'll be the downfall of our families. My father said that.
And then
the night before Albert died at the Sheraton Hotel, they had a meeting with Trafficanti and Carlos Marcellus, and they begged him. They begged him to allow the business to happen. He said no. He said we didn't sign up for this. This is not what we're about. And he was executed the next day, and it was the worst mistake they ever made, because he was the glue. He held them together. He was the glue for the commission. He was the most feared man that ever came into America.
And then who was it that killed your father?
It was an orchestration of some people from Chicago, Detroit, and Rhode Island, they say. But, Raymond told me that was not true. But you got to read the book.
Okay, and the book is Family Legacy, and you can find the book at the FamilyLegacyTheNovel.com. Also, too, there'll be a link in the Opperman Report bookstore and on my Facebook. We'll even have a link in the description of the show. Okay, so then...
if you're from New York, then you should know about my Uncle Tony, who actually they did the film On the Waterfront about.
What was his last name?
Wild Bredo. Tony Anastasio.
No, I wasn't familiar with that, no. Sorry.
It was my father's brother. The family name is Anastasio. My father changed his to Anastasia just to try to confuse people, but his brothers all worked down at the docks. His brother ran the docks only because of Albert's strength.
Well, then what happens next? You get
Tough Tony Anastasio, they call him.
Okay, I've heard that name, Tough Tony Anastasia. I've heard that name. But I'm a young guy. Okay, but now what happens next? You get into football?
I was playing football, but when I played, your class had to graduate before you were allowed to play pro ball. They didn't have any hardship cases. So I went up I had a tryout with the New York Jets, and a very successful tryout. But they had a farm team on the East Coast where we played. It was almost like having baseball farm team. We played Jimmy Christie, a whole bunch of players played in there before they went into the pros. And the year that I was eligible to play, there was a lot of my friends were playing down in Philadelphia. They had a great young team, and I said to Eubank, I said, I'd like to go down and try play with Philadelphia for a year or so. He said, well, if it doesn't work out, you got a home here at New York. We want you to play here, but, it's up to yourself. And so I went down there, and then they hired this guy, Joe Kuharich, as a coach. And I watched this man trade a championship football team away. He traded Sonny Jurgensen and Tommy McDonald for a guy named Norman Snead. Traded. It was just incredible what he did. So I just Ali had just won the title, and we came out of a meeting one day, and Kuharich walked right by Timmy Brown and I. And I turned around and I said, don't you speak to people anymore? And the guy turned around and said, oh, I said, you know what? Take this team and stick it up your ass. And Timmy said, while you're at it, trade me. So I went into boxing, and I said to somebody in Philadelphia, I said, I can knock this guy out, Ali. And they said, what a great idea. So I spent 6 months in a gym, and I guess I was one of 10 people in the history of boxing in the heavyweight division that ever became a world-ranked fighter without boxing amateur.
Give us an idea. Well, what position did you play in football before you got into boxing?
Defensive end.
And how tall are you, and how much did you weigh? Because you're like a huge guy.
6'6", and I was playing ball. I was weighing about 280.
Whoa. When
I started fighting, it took me down to 230. I mean, it was like skin and bone shaking. It was an experience.
How old were you when you started fighting?
23.
Now, when you were doing this stuff, you were trying out for the football and fighting and stuff, were you still doing stuff with organized crime, just doing stuff on the side?
Well, yeah. I mean, it was the football, and you had to have a day job. So playing sports was my day job,
And how were you making money? What were you doing? Can you talk about it?
Well, we took care of a lot of unions, and I had a great job I ran depots for Tasty Freeze ice cream, Carroll Brothers. It was called Carroll Brothers. They were soft ice cream trucks that had hamburgers and everything on it. There was an outfit out of Chicago, and we had a depot in Newark, and then we had one in Queens.
Okay, and you were just there keeping the trucks running on time?
Well, just making sure. It was, again, a day job,
Gotcha.
But we took care of the unions, and, I ran around with Hoffa and a few other people, and we took care of a lot of union business and just a lot of family business.
Okay, so then you start fighting. Give us an idea of some of the people you fought.
Oh, man. I fought everybody. The only person I was signed to fight 4 times with Ali, but we never really got it on. He was always apologizing. But I fought Norton. I fought Cleveland Williams. I fought Terry Daniels. I fought Carl Gizzi. I fought the Champ of Wales. I fought Bugner. I fought Foreman. I fought Cleveland Williams, Alvin Blue Lewis, Manuel Ramos. I knocked out Manuel Ramos when he was number 2 in the world. I beat Alvin Blue Lewis when he was ranked number 1 in the world. I beat Cleveland Williams when he was number 6 in the world. I beat Terry Daniels when he was number 8 in the world. I had a pretty speculative career,
Yeah, Ron Lyle too. You left out. Now, and this was boxing in its heyday. This was like when they were really fighting, right?
Well, my problem was, if I would have, I had two things that were difficult situation. First of all, I would take a fight on 2 days' notice. If I ever went to camp like these guys do and trained 6 months, no one would have ever beaten me ever. I mean, every time I got in shape, I destroyed world-ranked fighters. And, when I fought Ken Norton in San Diego, I trained 4 days for the fight. They called me up on the phone and they said, you want to fight Kenny Norton? I said, and I had like 6 indictments for union business on me. And I said, where's the ticket at? And the guy said, you'll take the fight? I said, where's the ticket? Send me a ticket. Where's the fight at? San Diego. Yeah, I'll take it. I wanted to get out of town. So I went out on a week's notice for the Norton fight, and I gave him the worst licking he ever had. I actually beat Norton, and they took a decision.
Now,
it was one of the greatest heavyweight fights in California. It was a trippy fight.
Now, were any of those fights like on Wild World of Sports and Saturday Afternoon, that kind of stuff, that I would have seen?
Probably the Norton fight's been shown around. The Foreman fight was. The Blue Lewis fight was. Cleveland Williams and Terry Daniels. Those fights were done down in Texas because they were looking for a fighter to fight Frazier. And when I beat Terry Daniels, they were looking for a white guy to fight Frazier. So when I beat Terry Daniels, I flew back to Philadelphia on the plane with Yank Durham, and he said, if you beat one more good fighter, you can have the Frazier fight. And I said, you name the place and the time, send me a ticket. So a month later, I fought Cleveland Williams down in his hometown in Houston, and I beat Cleveland Williams hands down. And Terry Daniels got the Frazier fight, and Cleveland Williams fought George Savallo. So it was kind of a comedy of errors,
Well, if you were in with guys like Meyer Lansky and Frank Costello, couldn't they help you with your career in boxing, get you the right fights?
I had a contract with Sam Margolis, who was the head of the Jewish mob in Philly, who had Liston, and I was undefeated for my first 16 fights because I fought some good fighters, but I wouldn't listen to anybody. I had too many things. I was living in Boston. I was living in Philly. I was up and down the East Coast. I was in New York. I was, I liked my day job. I liked my night job better than my day job,
And Steve, I guess, was telling me that the part of Rocky is partially based on you. That's
my life. I mean, I did a film called Farewell, My Lovely. It was the first movie. The film career, what these guys did more for me was they tried to get me off the streets. So they kept throwing movies in my face. When I was in Boston, when I was starting boxing, I was up in Boston, and Steve McQueen came in to do the Thomas Crown Affair, and Steve and I became very good friends because we looked after him. We took care of him when he was up there. And he said, "Come on, man, come down to the set. I'm going to put you in this movie. I'll get you a card and everything. Come to Hollywood, man. We'll have a good time." And I said, "I don't think so. It's just, So then they came to me to do a picture called The Great White Hope with James Earl Jones, and I had just knocked out Manuel Ramos, who was number 2 in the world, and then wanted me to quit boxing. And Raymond Patriarchus set that whole thing up in Rhode Island because he wanted me off the street. And I turned it down. It was a done deal. All I had to do was sign the contract. And I gave the part to Jim Beattie. I said, "There's a guy in Minneapolis just retired from boxing. He needs a job. Give him a call." And then they came to me when I retired. They came to me to do a picture of Farewell, My Lovely with Robert Mitchum. And I said, it's time. So I came to Hollywood, and it's all Mitchum's fault.
Hey, that must have been cool hanging out with Mitchum, huh?
Robert was terrific. Robert was like a surrogate father. He was just an amazing man. He did a great. He took me by the hand and just walked me through the business and showed me a lot of very good things that I needed to know, and the picture worked out extremely well. Farewell, My Lovely is a classic film today.
Yeah, Philip Marlowe. Yeah. Now, out of all your movies, because I'm looking through them here, King Kong, Superman 2, which one, and then Dragnet, which I got to talk to you about that in a minute. But for the listeners who can't see your face right now, which one do you think they would recognize you, the most recognizable film you're in?
Well, Superman movies are iconic. They're so huge. Here you are 40 years later, and they're still the best they're the best of the Superman films that were ever done. There'll never be another Christopher Reeve. They're never going to find another Christopher. And Richard Donner was a great director. But Farewell, My Lovely is probably one of my favorite films because of the fact of Mitchum and the relationship. And it was a great cast. We had a lot of fun doing it. It was the film came out very well, and I probably that year would have gotten nominated for supporting actor, but Mitchum set up a meeting for me with Johnny Carson to do the Johnny Carson show, and I met him at the Polo Lounge, and he said to me, if you come on the show, I'm going to get you nominated because I love the film. I think it's a great movie, and you did a brilliant job in it, and Mitchum loves you. And I said, okay. So I said, your show is live, isn't it? Yeah. And I said, well, I don't think I can do it. He said, well, what are you talking about? I said, well, I'm going to come on your show. You're going to ask me about my father, and I'm going to ask you where the men's room's at. Mm-hmm. He said, you would get up and leave? I said, yeah. He said, whoa, why? I said, because I don't want anybody talking about my father. And it was a time when I was very guarded because I had just come off the streets. And he said, well, we'll construct some questions that will just go around the issue and everything. And I said, listen, you're the number one news reporter on television today. You have Albert Anastasia's son sitting on your set, and you're not going to ask me about him when nobody talks about him? I said, please don't take any offense, but I didn't fall off a turnip truck here. So I got up and left, and Mitch called me on the phone. He said, are you out of your mind? What is wrong with you? He said, this is Hollywood. Who cares? And I should have listened to him, actually.
Well, and you never had another chance to get back with Johnny?
I saw him several times afterwards, and he kept telling me, please come on the show. But it was, you have an opportunity to do something when the picture's hot and it's coming out and stuff, if you don't follow through with what you're supposed to do. I mean, I should have done probably 50 movies, but I picked and choose what I wanted to do. And, because I enjoy the business a lot, and it's, and everything I've ever done came out very well. I'm very fortunate in that manner.
And you were saying that the anniversary of Superman's coming up, and you're going to be doing a bunch of appearances on that, and people can find those on the schedule at FamilyLegacyTheNovel.com coming up. Now, your character when you did Superman, people must have been stopping you in the street at that point, right?
Well, they were from Farewell, My Lovely, actually. But yeah, Superman was, when I did the Superman movie, I met Richard Donner. I was doing a film with Gene Hackman called March or Die down in Spain, and Hackman fell off a horse, and we had time. We went up to London to meet Donner for the Superman movie, and we had a discussion about how this character to play a mute character, like that. And I said, absolutely, I want to do it because Jackie Gleason was a friend of mine, and he did a picture called Gigo that he won an Oscar for. He played a deaf, dumb mute. And I said, if I ever get an opportunity to play a character that I have to use body language and facial expressions, I'm going to jump at it. And Superman was that opportunity for me to take a character because when you look at the three villains, Terrence was a super vicious guy. Sarah was a man-eater. Somebody had to relate to the kids. So I took this character who was this big, brutish guy and played him like a child. And it worked very well.
Now, did you have any acting lessons and stuff like that?
Yeah, Robert Mitchum.
Okay. Hey, I got a question for you. It's kind of crazy. It's kind of out there. But you knew Jackie Gleason. And you hear these stories about Jackie Gleason had something to do with the UFOs. He knew something about UFOs. Ever hear about a story like that?
Jackie was a good guy. He was a very, very talented man. He was very, very well respected by the mob. I mean, we had a lot of influence in the whole industry, music industry, everything, so.
But did you ever hear something about Jackie Gleason being taken to a base where he got some inside information about UFOs?
You hear 50 stories about stuff like that. Okay. There's some true factors about whether there's the existence of this or the existence of that, and there's people who have been to places in New Mexico that have seen things that no one talks about, and everybody's always skirting the issues like everything in politics.
Okay, but did you ever talk to Jackie about it?
We had some discussions about it, yeah.
Really? Okay, that's interesting. Okay, and what did he say to you? Do you want to tell us what he said?
Well, but nobody, people are going to believe what they want to believe. So no matter what you say, People, there's 20 stories about my father. There's 20 stories about Charlie Luciana. Everybody thought Charlie Luciana died at the Naples airport in 1962. He faked his own death.
Really?
Nobody, and I've got pictures of him. His son lives in New Jersey. He and I talk all the time. There's pictures of Charlie in New York 3 years after he died.
Really?
With his family. And he came back and settled some things before he did die. And, Charlie was an amazing individual. I kind of like Charlie a lot, actually.
Jack O'Halloran, this is great stuff. Let's take a little commercial break here, okay? We're going to be right back with more of Jack O'Halloran, boxer, movie star, insider with the JFK assassination. We're even going to be talking about the Marilyn Monroe death. A lot of stuff that we can hear from Jack O'Halloran. You can find his website at FamilyLegacyTheNovel.com. The book is called Family Legacy. You can find it at the Opera Report bookstore, Amazon, or you go to Jack's website here, Family.
And now a word from our sponsors. Archival Revival, the Christian Film Archive, is currently paying for vintage Christian films. They are dedicated to preserving and restoring classic Christian films and media. So if you have original prints, negatives, or other film elements of classic Christian films, or you have audio recording masters for classic Christian record albums, they want to buy them from you. So email archival.revival@gmail.com and they're going to make you an offer. Archival Revival wants to preserve these classic Christian films so that they continue saving people for years. These films have brought people to salvation. They want to continue that. Their staff has decades of experience in handling and preserving of film elements, utilize the very best climate-controlled film storage facilities around the world. Contact them today at archival.revival@gmail.com. If there's someone you know has these prints, negatives, recording masters, or other materials from vintage Christian films, you can check out their blog at archivalrevival.blogspot.com. Now, just so you understand, Archival Revival wants to pay you for these films. So you can look in your church attic, in the church basement. If you have a friend who runs a Christian youth ministry, these youth vacation Bible study camp, they have these old films in those big metal containers, 16 millimeter and 35 millimeter. Archival Revival wants to buy them from you. So this is a sponsor that actually wants to give you money. And all you have to do is contact them, tell them what you have. If you're in the UK or Ireland or Africa, these films are all over the world and they're gathering dust and they're going to deteriorate if they don't get into the hands of Archival Revival. So that's archival.revival@gmail.com, or the blog spot is archivalrevival.blogspot.com. Don't forget, this show is brought to you by pscoco.com. Phoebe Sod is an independent curator with the Cocoa Exchange. The Cocoa Exchange is formerly known as Dove Chocolate Discoveries, and they make the finest silky smooth chocolate because the products start with the best cocoa beans, which are tested for quality and flavor by expert technicians. The Cocoa Exchange offers not just premium chocolates, but anything from sauces and spices to brownie and cake mixes, and even coffee and martini mixes. If you wish to treat yourself or someone you love to a sweet and tasty gift, then the Cocoa Exchange is the brand for you. So you go to pscoco.com, you click on the Shop Now button. You can see all their beautiful chocolates. You can order it right now tonight. It could be in your mailbox in a couple of days. Or if you want to get into the chocolate business, you want to be a chocolatier just like Phoebe Sod, click the Contact Us button and you can learn how to get your own website, go into the cocoa chocolate business and sell chocolate and make a little bit of money there. Remember, all these shows on Awake are brought to you by emailrevealer.com. You can go to emailrevealer.com and get a copy of my book, How to Become a Successful Private Investigator. But you also do all kinds of different services for you. An online dating service investigation. It's called an online infidelity investigation. And that's where you give us your husband or your boyfriend, your girlfriend's email address, and we trace it back to their online dating websites. And we return a list of all the dating sites that email is registered to. We can expand on that investigation and trace it back to porn sites, escort service sites, swinger sites, gambling websites, and even prescription drug websites. If you think your ex-husband or something is addicted to prescription medication, or involved in an extreme online pornography addiction, we can produce a report for you that you can use in court. Adoption investigations. If you want to locate your birth parents or your birth child you gave away for adoption, we can do adoption investigations for you. Asset searches for you. Locate bank accounts, hidden assets, hidden properties, hidden income, all different kinds of services in the asset search investigation. Email tracing. If you need to locate or identify somebody from just an email address, we can do an email trace investigation for you, and all kinds of digital forensics, computer and cell phone digital forensics, where we can recover deleted content from an email or a hard drive and produce a report for you that you can use in court. That's emailrevealer.com, or you can contact me at oppermaninvestigations@gmail.com.
Okay, welcome back to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman. We're here today with Jack O'Halloran, boxer, actor, JFK insider. Guy's got a little bit of everything. Father was Albert Anastasia, hung out with Meyer Lansky and Frank Costello. You can find his book, Family Legacy, and the website is familylegacythenovel.com. Now, one quick question. I got a million questions. I got to have you come back for another 2 hours. We got 90 minutes to go. Let me ask you a question, man. I heard you didn't get along too well with Christopher Reeve. What went on there?
No, that's, there's so much embellished in everything. Christopher was a nice kid, but he was very immature. He was a kid. He was a 26-year-old with a 16-year-old brain, and he came from a very spoiled family in New Jersey. His mother was one of the wealthiest women in New Jersey. He went to Juilliard. The Superman was the very first movie he ever really did. And it was a huge role. And he really, when he came on the set, he was 172 pounds. And the guy that worked him out, we put up a plan together. And I told him, I said, you can't bulk this kid up because he is too vain. He won't wear anything underneath his costume. So just definition him like Steve Reeves, who was Mr. America, who was very defined and cut it like 195 pounds. I said it just put a lot of definition in him. And so they did that. And he I don't think they'll ever find another actor that could play Clark Kent Superman as well as he did. And, but he walked around like that. He wasn't like a lot of actors that you leave it on the set and then you go into your life, you do what you got to do. He walked around like Superman all the time, and he did something very, very foolish one time, and I called him out on it, and everybody made a big deal out of it, and so I like Christopher. We never really had any animosities other than, he talked too much. He said things he shouldn't have said. He was very silly. Talked about my father and stuff, and my association in New York, and he didn't know what he was talking about.
I'm glad you explained that. Because when you do Google your name, it comes up, when you TMZ and stuff like that.
Well, they take, the media takes everything out of context. You can't. It's like, I'll tell you exactly what happened. There's a very good restaurant in London called the San Marino's, and it's on Beecham Place. And the guy was a Italian guy. He was the first real explicit Italian restaurant in London, and he was a very good friend of mine, and I took a lot of business in from the studio. So they used to go in there and eat every night because the food was superb. And he was in there one night, and they were talking about my father and everything in New York, and that's this, and the guy only called me on the phone. He said, "Do you know this Christopher Reeve kid well?" And I said, "What are you talking about?" He was in here talking and saying a lot of things that I don't think he has the right to say. So the next day I went down and I grabbed him and I said, you and I have to have a conversation. And then I had a conversation with him, and we were in a room by ourselves. And then when we came back out, he pulled this Superman business. Nobody could talk to me that way and all this other bullshit. So I put him against the wall, and I was just about ready to smack the hell out of him. And Richard Donner come up and whispered in my ear, "Not in the face, Jack, not in the face." And I dropped him, and I laughed like hell about it. I walked away. And people made a big to-do, it just didn't. I never had another problem with him. It was, Chris was a nice kid, but, he lived in a fantasy world.
Yeah, the way you explain it, he's a 24-year-old kid, and here you are with his life. I can totally understand what you're saying. By the way, I just want to caution you a bit because we will be airing this on AM radio. It's a family show, there, Jack. Okay, so yeah, BS. Well, we want to keep use BS instead of the other one. But don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Now another movie, real quick, Dragnet. Right? Now,
great film. A lot of fun doing it.
Yeah, underrated
Danny
film.
Aykroyd was a great guy. Tom Hanks was a good guy. And I thought it was a very good film. You know, if you could watch Dragnet 50 times, and you'll never get all the one-liners that Danny Aykroyd did in it. There's just a lot of great humor in that picture.
Yeah, and Harry Morgan, you know, from the original Dragnet, from MASH.
Poor Harry was such a nice man, but he was so senile when he did that picture. You know,
Really?
we actually lost him on the set.
Really? Oh, you can't tell.
He wandered off.
you can't tell. Well, that's
One of the
interesting.
nicest man. He was one of the nicest guys. God, I really liked Harry. Harry was a good guy.
Now, what interests me about that movie is the theme of the movie or the story is that this chaotic group called the Pagans are trying to cause chaos, and that they're hooked up with this guy like a Hugh Hefner, Larry Flint kind of character. Was that based on Larry Flint or Hugh Hefner?
Well, I think it was Hefner.
Okay. Now,
I don't think Flint was that prominent yet.
but it's very similar to a real life group called the Process Church. There's this. Okay, now what did that come up in the making of the film?
No, it was a good script. You know, Tom Mankiewicz is a good writer, and it was a good script. And it was a fun movie. I mean, it was just a lot of fun doing it. Hollywood, you know.
And you've heard of the Process Church?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. And how did you hear about them?
Well, I'm a street person. I know about everything that goes on in the street.
Okay, very interesting. Very interesting. And do you ever come into contact with them?
Do I ever what?
Did you ever come into contact with them?
No, people like that don't bother me.
Okay.
They don't come near me.
Very interesting. And you didn't see that.
Smart. They're much smarter than that.
You didn't see that kind of theme in the movie, though.
No, I mean, it was, you know, you could attribute a lot of things to a lot of things
Right.
if you want to. You know, people make mountains out of molehills all the time. You know, it's just, you know, it is what it is. And the way they did the film, I thought worked out very well. I thought it was a good film myself.
No, it's a
I had lot
highly
of fun doing
underrated
it.
film, for sure. It's a highly underrated film. You can watch it 100 times, like you said. Okay. Now, what about you hear about these other famous people in Hollywood, like people like Lou Costello and Desi Arnaz, having these organized crime connections. What can you tell us about that?
Well, they all did. I mean, the industry was controlled for a long time.
Right.
Lou Costello was out of New Jersey. And you know, the most entertainment at that time, music business and everything they had their thumbs in everything, because you got to understand something. Hollywood in the 20s and 30s, the cinematographer union was out of Chicago. The mob from Chicago ran that part of the business and ran it for years.
And what about today?
It's a whole different business today. You know, it's just everything turned into business, and people forgot how the industry really runs. Actually, hopefully it's coming back to a little bit of the old scenario again. But studios have gotten just way out of context.
I wanted to touch on, too, we talked a little bit off the air about the death of Marilyn Monroe. What do you know about that?
Marilyn was, Marilyn was an amazing lady. You know, she had an affair with Jack Kennedy, but she fell in love with Bobby. Bobby Kennedy, she really fell in love with. And when she got pregnant, she was calling him up to tell him that she would take care of it like the other 11 abortions that she had. And he cut her off. She couldn't reach him by phone. She couldn't reach him by his private phone. Every outlet she had to reach him, he turned her away. So she started drinking and popping more pills and stuff. And she talked a lot because she knew a lot, you know. So Sam Giancana took her up to Lake Tahoe, where he owned the hotel up there, and he spent the weekend with her. And after he said that, he said, the poor lady's got to die. She's just really saying a lot of things that can't be said. And she, you know, they put a suppository up her butt, and boom, she was history. But you know, and Bobby Kennedy, and they all knew they were. Bobby Kennedy was right there in her bed, and when they took her to the hospital, she was already dead. They took her out of the house because they were trying to sanitize it to get her diary, which will surface very soon. Her diary was taken out. The FBI got it. Hoover got it because had Jack Kennedy won another election, Hoover would have been out of a job, and he was going to get some insurance that would have taken him out of that position, because Marilyn wrote everything down. She kept a very, very strict diary, and they never found it. No one ever found the diary.
And what makes you think that the diary is going to turn up?
Because it was put in the hands of Hoover's friend, and who put it in Europe, and when he dies, it'll pop up.
Okay, and up there, Cal Nav, right? The casino. Was she raped up there?
Was she what?
Raped.
No. Who said that?
A lot of people say that.
What do you mean raped? By whom?
By the guys who got all drugged up and messed up there.
Oh, she spent the weekend with Giancana. What do you mean raped? I mean, nobody raped Marilyn.
Okay.
Marilyn was too well protected. Everybody loved Marilyn. Raped? Whoever? I never heard that. I never heard that story. Where'd you get that one from?
This is in many books. You can go back and listen to the other shows I've done about it. This is in many books that she was raped up there.
Oh my God! See, let me tell you something. You know, Marilyn was so loved by people, but at the end of her life, she just talked too much. She was, she had and she knew a lot of pillow talk. She was there. She heard a lot of things.
Okay, and you're saying I've heard the suppository story before too, as well.
Well, that's true.
Okay, and you're saying that Bobby Kennedy was there that night?
Sitting right on her bed, him and Peter Lawford.
Okay. And who was with them, do you know?
What do you mean, who was with them?
Yeah, like supposedly there was a cop that was with them.
There was. He was the guy who was supposedly sanitizing the place, but Giancana, he worked for Giancana, and he was supposed to get his hands on her diary, and that didn't happen. Her diary was picked up by Hoover's people. They found it first.
Okay, there's another story too that Tony Spilatro was there.
From Vegas?
Yeah.
Listen, no.
Tony
was from Chicago. He was a fool. Tony made a lot of mistakes in Vegas, and he got what he deserved.
Okay, you knew Tony Spilatro?
Yeah.
Okay, you knew Frank Collada?
I know a few people. Why?
I'm just wondering, hey, do you ever get involved with the Mob Museum out here in Vegas?
No, they asked me to come over there several times, but they have the chair where my father was shot.
Oh,
like
they
that.
do? Okay.
That's what they say, yeah. I don't know. I haven't been there.
Okay. Because you never came out to do like a speech for your book or anything like that? Tell stories for your book?
Hello?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Say it again?
Yeah, like you never considered coming out.
I can now. I lost you.
Yeah, you never considered coming out to the Mob Museum and doing a little presentation for your book and stuff?
We talked about it a couple times, and I just... I was going to do it one time. We were going to set it up, and I don't know. I had to go somewhere or something. Vegas is not the Vegas that I know.
Yeah.
Vegas has changed dramatically, and people don't understand that either. Vegas changed drastically when Howard Hughes came in. When Howard Hughes came in, he brought the government in, and Vegas was no longer the Vegas that I knew.
Yeah, I know. I used to live out here in the 80s, and I used to come out here in the 80s. And even the change from the 80s to the 90s is so sad.
Well, it's. I mean, when you stop and let me tell you something. When we controlled Vegas, you wouldn't even think of committing a crime. I mean, women could walk 24 hours a day anywhere in that town. Everything was done with a class act. People went to shows with suits and ties on.
Yeah.
It was a different town altogether. And now you don't even have that many high rollers to go to anymore. It's a slot machine run town.
Yeah. Yeah. And what they did.
I remember the first time I ever went into Circus, and I said, wow, man, they just made it a family oriented casino. And I walked outside and I looked in the parking lot, and there was motorhomes everywhere. And I said to a friend of mine, I said, wow, what is this all about? He said, it's the town is changing to a slot machine, family oriented town. It's history. Town's history.
Yeah, what they've done to Fremont Street with the canopy and the zip lines and all that is just so.
When you stop the Vegas started turning. Well, like I said, when Howard, there was a time when you went into the little rooms and you could see some of the best entertainment you ever saw. And here's what killed Vegas: the junkets. The junkets killed Vegas because people came out there with no money, and they were playing on, waitresses in the little rooms used to make $200 a day. It went from $200 a day to $50 a day because people came out there with no money. They didn't have the cash that they used to have when they first opened the place.
When's the last time you've been to Vegas?
Oh, I go over once in a while to see friends and stuff, and I do some things over there. But, it's just, you look at the drug problem you have in Vegas. That would have never been there with us. There was it's serious, and it's a serious problem. You have more crime on the Strip than there ever was.
Forget the crime. You got to pay for parking now on the Strip. That's the biggest crime. That's the biggest crime they can pull.
Oh my God!
You got to pay for parking. Can you even imagine?
I tell you something. It's just like, let me say, they just had that mass shooting over there, yeah, which was diabolical. Okay, now there was no reason that should have ever happened. There's such high tech security today that you could depict anything if you had places set up properly. Now, how do you have a guy shooting from a window as high up and kicking the wind out? That should have been that was the first. When that glass hit the ground, somebody should have been up in that room instantly. You understand? The whole thing is such a diabolical bunch of bull. How everything happened, when it happened, and how it happened, and the people involved. It was just, and you see how fast it's all of a sudden been blown away? No one talks about it anymore.
Well, they just released the preliminary police report just 2 days ago. It's 81 pages long, so it's back in the news a bit. But yeah, it's a horrible situation here. I had to keep my kid home from school the next day, and then we had to keep her home again on that Thursday because people don't realize this, but there was a guy in town who was making threats to shoot up the schools. And they arrested him on Thursday.
But see that. But that's the kind of stuff that happens when things like that happen. You understand? Yeah. Everybody wants to become. When they glamorize people that do things like that, all they do is open up the door for people to say, "Oh, I can get my name in the news." Right, wow, man. It's diabolical.
No,
when I see things like that, it makes me sad.
Because a guy like you're in all these movies and stuff like that. You're this iconic figure, huge guy, boxing, all this kind of stuff like that. What about guys like Elvis? Did you run into Elvis?
Elvis was a good guy. I liked Elvis. Elvis was I'll tell you a funny story. He was up in New York years ago. My God, it was. I was just, I think I was a young guy. Anyway, he was in a mob place, and they walked in by mistake, him and his crew, and they were sitting at the bar, and I was in the back doing some business with a friend who owned the place, and one of the guys that hung around with Elvis was a mouthy individual, and he mouthed off to the wrong person in the bar, and they were going to just put them all in the river. And when I came out and I saw who was there, and I grabbed the owner and I said, that's Elvis Presley. You can't, what's wrong with what's going on here? And he said, well, this guy got a little bit fresh with this guy, and and he threatened somebody, and they said, oh, really? And they thought they were in some local bar, and these guys were getting ready to take them all outside and put them in the trash can. And so I got in between it, and I said, listen. They're entertainers who have big mouths and don't know what they're talking about. We'll just smooth this over. And I sat down with Elvis. I said, you guys walked into the wrong place at the wrong time, and you're not going to walk out of here unless somebody apologizes and very peacefully leave here and don't ever come back. And he and I became friends from that. He thanked me. He said, Jesus, man, if I can ever do anything for you, come Vegas or anything, please come and see me. And, thank you so very much. And, and he was a really nice guy. When you got him by himself, he was a hell of a kid. I liked Elvis, actually.
Well,
very talented man.
You got any Sinatra stories?
Francis Albert? Francis wasn't as powerful as people thought he was. Actually, his wife had more. His wife Nancy was a niece of Tony Accardo out of Chicago. And when Frank divorced her, he wasn't allowed in New York anymore. That's where Jilly came in. Chili used to have to go into places to make sure no one was there. And then when they built the Westchester Theater, they brought him back because they needed the publicity for his name and all. So they but Frank was his own world. He was not as connected as people think he was. There was a lot of he was a very talented guy. He was a great actor. He was a great entertainer. He had a magic voice. But they saved his career for him. Did Here to Eternity. That was Sam Giancana did that. Sam Giancana. He went back to New York. He begged for help, but Sinatra was not. People in Chicago. Sam was a big time supporter of entertainers, and he said, if I did this movie, because he was losing his voice at the time, was having voice problems, and he knew the part would make. He knew he'd win an Oscar. And so they did something that sorted it out. And, the owner of the film did not want him to do it, said he'd never do it because of Ava Gardner. He stole Ava Gardner away from the guy. And the guy wasn't too happy about it. And Frank was kind of ran around town like he owned places because certain people looked after him.
I always heard that Dean Martin had more connections in Sinatra.
Dean Martin was purely connected out of Youngstown, Ohio. He definitely was. His family were very good people. Dean was a good guy. I loved Dean. And he didn't like Sinatra because he knew he was full of shit.
You gotta watch it. And Dean's daughter-in-law. A lot of people don't know this, but Dean Martin's daughter-in-law was Dorothy Hamill, the ice skater. She married Dean Martin's son.
When his son died, he never got over that. He never got over that. It was very sad because his son was a nice kid, and Dean was a family man. We used to sit at the play. He used to go to a restaurant called La Familia in Beverly Hills, and he just never was the same after his son died. I like Dean. Dean was a really good guy. Very, very talented man.
Yeah, I actually met Dorothy Hamill the day after she gave birth. She gave birth like 2 days earlier. I met her in Arizona. Now, what about Sammy Davis Jr.? What do you know about him?
Sammy was a good guy. He was he gambled degenerate. He had a bad gambling problem, but he was really. I like Sammy a lot. Sammy was a very, very talented guy, boy. And he came in an era when black people were just coming out and being able to be exposed in the entertainment world. He came at a very tough time when but being in the Rat Pack and stuff like that enhanced his exposure, and people got to see just how talented he was. Do
you know that Deep Throat story with Sammy Davis Jr.?
I thought you said this was a family show.
It is. Well, we can. I didn't say anything bad yet. What do you know, Jack? Come on.
Oh no, you just leave that one alone. Man.
Okay, but the guy passed out a polygraph. Okay. You know what I'm saying? Okay.
Sammy was a fun guy.
Well, now what about this stuff with Sammy and the Church of Satan? What the hell was going on there?
Everybody, again, like I said, people embellish things so. I felt bad for his poor wife, Altavi. She was just such a nice woman. And, he was in so much hock when he died.
Right. Right.
Boy, he was a gambling degenerate. He gambled a lot, boy. It was sad. He was a really nice man. I liked Sammy a lot.
Hey, real quick, I'm sorry. But back to Dean Martin. His uncle was Abe Vigoda.
Yeah.
Right. Now, what about Abe Vigoda? Was he hooked up?
Oh. Do you know the guy who was the most connected guy? I'll tell you, the guy who was so well protected and so loved was Jimmy Durante.
Oh, really?
My father loved Jimmy Durante. Jimmy Durante could not do anything wrong, and never did, actually. He never abused it. But he never, ever wanted for anything. He was, and another very talented man.
That's what.
But he was loved by the guys in New York. Really loved him.
Oh, hey, what about guys like Don Rickles too, man? People don't realize how hooked up he was, right?
Well, like I said to you, the entertainment industry, all those clubs, you had all those guys, like, what's his name? The other guy out of the Rat Pack, Joey Bishop.
Right.
He was from Philadelphia, but they all had to play the Catskills. They had to play certain clubs because they were all mob owned. So they were places that they had to play that people said, well, geez, you guys are big stars. Why would you go back there and play? Because they had no choice. They helped keep places alive because they had live entertainment. Same as Vegas. They all signed up to go to Vegas because they were put contracts in front of them,
It's just so funny how so many of these guys, you see them on, like Lou Costello or Grandpa Al Lewis, like they seem like such lovable characters, joke-like characters on TV, and meanwhile, you meet them in person, they're pretty serious guys. Anyway, we got a little commercial break coming up here. We got Jack O'Halloran. Okay, we got to have you back, Jack. This is great stuff. I'm really enjoying this. We'll have you back just to talk about the Sammy Davis Jr. story. Jack O'Halloran. His book is called Family Legacy. Okay, and you could find it on his website called FamilyLegacyTheNovel.com. And coming up shortly, they're going to be doing a whole tour back with the Superman tour. They're going to reunite all the actors from Superman, and they're going to do those autograph signings and stuff like that, events. And you'll be able to find that schedule for that on FamilyLegacyTheNovel.com. Okay, we're going to be right back with more of Jack O'Halloran. I'm going to be asking him about the Kennedy assassination. I don't think Jack's going to confess to anything, but we'll get back and we'll talk to him after this when we get back right after this.
And now a word from our sponsors. Archival Revival, the Christian Film Archive, is currently paying for vintage Christian films. They are dedicated to preserving and restoring classic Christian films and media. So if you have original prints, negatives, or other film elements of classic Christian films, or you have audio recording masters for classic Christian record albums, they want to buy them from you. So email archival.revival@gmail.com and they're going to make you an offer. Archival Revival wants to preserve these classic Christian films so that they continue saving people for years. These films have brought people to salvation. They want to continue that. Their staff has decades of experience in handling and preserving of film elements, utilize the very best climate-controlled film storage facilities around the world. Contact them today at archival.revival@gmail.com. If there's someone you know has these prints, negatives, recording masters, or other materials from vintage Christian films, you can check out their blog at archivalrevival.blogspot.com. Now, just so you understand, Archival Revival wants to pay you for these films. So you can look in your church attic, in the church basement. If you have a friend who runs a Christian youth ministry, these youth vacation Bible study camp, they have these old films in those big metal containers, 16 millimeter and 35 millimeter. Archival Revival wants to buy them from you. So this is a sponsor that actually wants to give you money. And all you have to do is contact them, tell them what you have. If you're in the UK or Ireland or Africa, these films are all over the world and they're gathering dust and they're going to deteriorate if they don't get into the hands of Archival Revival. So that's archival.revival@gmail.com, or the blog spot is archivalrevival.blogspot.com. Don't forget, this show is brought to you by pscoco.com. Phoebe Sod is an independent curator with the Cocoa Exchange. The Cocoa Exchange is formerly known as Dove Chocolate Discoveries, and they make the finest silky smooth chocolate because the products start with the best cocoa beans, which are tested for quality and flavor by expert technicians. The Cocoa Exchange offers not just premium chocolates, but anything from sauces and spices to brownie and cake mixes, and even coffee and martini mixes. If you wish to treat yourself or someone you love to a sweet and tasty gift, then the Cocoa Exchange is the brand for you. So you go to pscoco.com, you click on the Shop Now button. You can see all their beautiful chocolates. You can order it right now tonight. It could be in your mailbox in a couple of days. Or if you want to get into the chocolate business, you want to be a chocolatier just like Phoebe Sod, click the Contact Us button and you can learn how to get your own website, go into the cocoa chocolate business and sell chocolate and make a little bit of money there. Remember, all these shows on Awake are brought to you by emailrevealer.com. You can go to emailrevealer.com and get a copy of my book, How to Become a Successful Private Investigator. But you also do all kinds of different services for you. An online dating service investigation. It's called an online infidelity investigation. And that's where you give us your husband or your boyfriend, your girlfriend's email address, and we trace it back to their online dating websites. And we return a list of all the dating sites that email is registered to. We can expand on that investigation and trace it back to porn sites, escort service sites, swinger sites, gambling websites, and even prescription drug websites. If you think your ex-husband or something is addicted to prescription medication, or involved in an extreme online pornography addiction, we can produce a report for you that you can use in court. Adoption investigations. If you want to locate your birth parents or your birth child you gave away for adoption, we can do adoption investigations for you. Asset searches for you. Locate bank accounts, hidden assets, hidden properties, hidden income, all different kinds of services in the asset search investigation. Email tracing. If you need to locate or identify somebody from just an email address, we can do an email trace investigation for you. And all kinds of digital forensics, computer and cell phone digital forensics, where we can recover deleted content from an email or a hard drive and produce a report for you that you can use in court. That's emailrevealer.com, or you can contact me at oppermaninvestigations@gmail.com.
Okay, welcome back to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman. We're here today with the famous Jack O'Halloran. I don't want to know the notorious Jack O'Halloran. I don't know how do I want to describe you. The great Jack O'Halloran, boxer, actor, JFK insider. Can't thank enough, Jack, for doing the show with me today, because I know I called you up, you'd forgotten about it, and you just sprung right into action. So thank you so much. Now, what can you tell us about the JFK assassination?
Well, let's start right, bare fact, simplicity. If you were going to say what one person was responsible for John Kennedy's death, it was his father, okay? Because his father made a lot of enemies with a lot of people. And you have to go back into the history of Joe Kennedy all the way back to the 20s. And you have to understand just how much happened in a period of time, and you'd say, Jack Kennedy, if you looked at Jack Kennedy specifically, he was not going to live out his term. He was dying of 4 different diseases. They used to shoot him up every day. Addison disease was eating his back up. He was in a lot of pain, and his father would have rather seen him die the way he died than to see him die with an illness and mark the family. And somebody would say, well, geez, that's rather cold, man. Why would you say that? But then look at what he did to his daughter. His daughter suffered from ADD before doctors knew how to control it. And rather than have her act out at some function or something, he lobotomized her and left her sit in an institution for 70 years before she died.
Yeah, a very underreported story too about how
no one ever talks about it. And he was, and when you sit down and you look at all the pieces, and you go back, you got to go back to the 1920s when Joe Kennedy was he was a bootlegger, okay, but he was a very, very smart guy. He was the youngest head of a president of a bank in the history of the country. He was married to Rose Fitzgerald, whose father, Honey Fitzgerald, was a very powerful man in Boston. The family were gangsters from Europe, from Ireland. So when he had a warehouse out of Canada during Prohibition, and Rose Fitzgerald's father brought all the liquor over from Scotland. He had the rights to it all. So they brought it into the Boston Harbor, took it up into Canada, and brought it down into America and bootlegging. And he had a warehouse with a guy that owned Fleischmann's liquor from Newark, New Jersey. And there was a load of booze that was supposed to come down that belonged to the Purple Gang, and Joe Kennedy hijacked it. And the old man from the Purple Gang said, "You're a dead man." So he ran back to his father-in-law and begged for help. And his father-in-law said, "I cannot help you. There's only one guy in this country that can help you, and he's in Chicago." So he went to Chicago to see the very first Don in Chicago, and he sat down with him, and the guy said, "You know what, kid? You're a real good earner. You go home. We'll take care of the Purple Gang, but here's the deal. You belong to us now." And he hated that being under thumb. So when you look back in his history, the only building that he ever put money into was the Mercantile Building in downtown Chicago because they made him build it. They sent him to Hollywood in the 20s. And he, if you look under the paperwork, he was the creator of RKO Studios. He put together the theaters and the first distribution deal that was ever put together out of a string of theaters. He was introduced to Randolph Hearst. He had dalliances with so many ladies out here in Hollywood. You know, he loved Hollywood. But in 26, he did something that there was a place called the Hamilton Club in Illinois, Chicago, that was like the New York Athletic Club politically in the country. And everybody hung out at the Hamilton Club. So they asked him to do something in 26. He did what they call a short sell.
Well, let me ask you a question really quick. The guy who owned the New York Athletic Club in New York was killed by the mob, right?
Well, he got out of line.
What was his name? Do you remember?
Calvo? What?
Calvo?
That sounds familiar.
Okay. All right. Go ahead.
So, you know, Joe Kennedy, he did some things. He stole $5 million from Pathé Newsreel, broad daylight. He got away with it. And they said, that's very good. Now here's what we really want you to do. And he put together what was called a short sell. And the short sell was aimed at 30 companies in Europe because Europe was the one who financed America, and they were not getting their money back. And after we were in World War I, we became a war-bearing country. We started manufacturing war goods. We started doing things all pertinent to war and took a lot of jobs and revenue out of Europe, who did that prior to us being involved. And Europe was screaming that they weren't getting their money back, blah, 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 blah. So they created what they call a short sell. And on the stock market. And Joe Kennedy orchestrated it, and it worked exceedingly well. What they didn't count on was when they took a couple days off to come back and finish it, the country panicked, and it caused a crash. They didn't do it specifically to make the crash. It just was a remnants of it. But Joe Kennedy came out of it as a very wealthy man with a lot of property and stuff that he had absconded with out of the... So when it was over, then they said, wow, you did such a great job. Now we want you to be ambassador to England. And, you know, he was going to become Ambassador Joe Kennedy. But why he got that is because after the crash was over, they had to rebuild the SEC. And he's the one who rebuilt it, and they put new laws in it because they knew Europe had to reinvest back in the country, and which they did. And the problem was one of the companies that was targeted was owned by Blackjack Bouvier, who was Jackie Kennedy's father. And his uncle and his father, and they belonged to the Rothschilds. So there were a lot of very angry people over what went on. So when he became ambassador to England, he went over to Europe, and some people grabbed him before he went. They said, you know, you're going over to Europe. We want you to tie up a few loose ends for us with some friends of ours over there. And the first guy he sat down with was a Shah of Iran, who was a gangster. And they put together a bank, and they lent money to Hitler, because America wasn't in the war yet. And then when Hitler got that money, he came back to the same crew. You add another guy called Khashoggi, and they sold weapons to him. And England turned around and said, hey, man, you can't do that. You're an ambassador for the United States in our country. What are you doing? You're giving money and aid to our enemy. So they threw him out of England. And nobody ever said why he came home at the first place, because the newspapers were controlled by the Gore family in Indiana and Hearst out on the West Coast. And there was no television, so it was never divulged why he was thrown out of England. You understand?
Yeah, quick question, back up a bit. Jackie and John Kennedy, was that an arranged marriage?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Jackie's mother planned to get her money back from this guy because he caused her husband drank himself to death. Blackjack Bouvier. He was an Earl Flynn type guy. He was a real super individual. And when his company defunct it like that, he just put himself in a bottle and he killed himself. And she never forgave Joe Kennedy for that. She knew the story because of her husband. He told her the truth. So Joe Kennedy actually gave Jackie $10 million to stay in that marriage, because her and Jack were both the same. They ran around each other, chasing everything that ran down the street.
Okay. So what can you tell us about Dallas?
Well, the night before at Sam Murchison Jr.'s house, I was there. And I was sent there because I was supposed to play football for the Dallas Cowboys, and Clint Murchison Jr. owned the Cowboys and the stadium they played in. And his father was probably, in 1960, Clint Murchison Sr. was the wealthiest man in the world. And he was the head of the Masons Lodge down in Texas, which was very powerful. So the kid had a great house in Dallas. It was like a ranch in the middle of the city. And he had this great party, and it was called Egyptian Nights, and it was the host of the party was J. Edgar Hoover. So I went there to see the people that were there and talk to some people. John McCoy was there, the banker from New York. Nixon was there. There was a bunch of people that were influential on certain things. And, when Johnson came back after 12 o'clock at night, they all went into, he just came back from, because Kennedy came into Fort Worth, and Johnson was there, and then he came back to the house party, and they went into a room, and boom, the secrecy all started, and people left the party. But the assassination of John Kennedy, it took them 3 months to reroute that thing down Dealey Plaza. And if you go down Dealey Plaza on the right-hand side, there was a cauldron in the street. You know what a cauldron is?
Like a sewage, right?
Yeah, in the curb of the street. Yeah,
they call it a rain.
Rain cauldron.
Storm sewer.
Yeah.
Storm sewer.
Yeah. Well, that storm sewer was big enough for me to walk down. It was big enough down there for me to walk down that right to the curb, to the river. Okay, so the first shot that came and hit Kennedy hit him in the throat, and it came from that cauldron. A guy named Johnny Roselli shot him.
Okay.
And there were 13 shots fired at Dealey Plaza that day. If you were going to kill Kennedy purposely from that place, at the window, like they said Oswald was at, it would be as the car came straight at the building. But they waited till it turned, went down a hill. The wind derelish in Dealey Plaza was so phenomenal that the police on the radios couldn't hear each other because it was just that windy. There were trees, there were signs. So you ask any marksman, if you're taking a mail order gun and bolt action, and you're, first of all, if I'm a marksman and I'm shooting a shot at that length of area, and I have to take in all the variables of the wind, the fact that the car is moving, it's going on a downgrade, and all the obstacles in place. And to put your heart at rest, it takes a sniper 60 seconds to put his heartbeat down because your pulse is in your finger. Yeah.
Hey, Jack, what about you? Were you ever in the military?
Oh, that's another story.
Because you were that age. They had the draft back then. What happened?
Well, it's another story.
All right, we'll come back and tell it again. Okay, go ahead.
But they...
you had to rest before you could shoot the gun.
So you have to arrest. Now, how do you shoot 3 shots in 28 seconds? You understand?
Right.
It's impossible. And to have any accuracy with a mail-order gun like that, and Oswald was not a crack marksman. He was all that bullarchy about him being on ranges and all. You understand there were 3 look-alike Oswalds, and no one ever talks about this either. He was locked up in New Orleans and in Cuba at the same time on the same day. How could that happen? You understand?
Yeah.
There was a guy from the CIA out of the Bay of Pigs that looked just like Oswald. And he was the guy that was at the shooting range, and here he is at a shooting range, and he's shooting at the guy next to him's targets. And the guy said, "Hey, buddy, what do you think you're doing?" And he jumped up. He said, "Don't you know who I am? I'm Lee Harvey Oswald," screaming it so that everyone would think Oswald spent a lot of time at a shooting range. Yeah? The thing was so well planned out, capped. And Oswald was a patsy.
Which Oswald was in Mexico?
The look-alike.
Okay.
He was in Cuba, actually.
No, in Mexico. He went to the Mexican embassy in Mexico. Yeah.
He got locked up the same time, the same day.
Okay.
You're talking about a whole scenario of, the whole thing of Conolly being shot first, Kennedy was actually shot 3 times that day. The bullet in his lower back they never talked about till 10 years later. He got shot 3 times that day. And the last shot was taken by the driver of the car, rear. And he was a Secret Service guy who put that down in writing before he died. Yeah.
A lot of people. I know the story about the driver reaching around and shooting.
He did. That's Greer.
But when you look at those images now today, it's pretty much been discredited that there wasn't a gun in his hand.
That's not true.
Okay.
That's not true. There was eight segments of that film, the Zapruder film, missing, and it's in there very plainly. That's why it was cut out.
So you want
the Zapruder film? The Zapruder film was Life magazine paid $150,000 for it, and it was never released for a year. And it was edited and everything right there in Texas. And guess who owned all the radio stations, AM, FM, all the newspapers? Everything was owned by the Murchison family. So the laboratory where the film was edited was owned by the Murchison family. Okay? And there were 8 frames taken out of it, of the original film.
It's interesting, too, because you see people like Mike Wallace, Dan Rather, McNeil Lear. They were all local reporters, too, who were catapulted into these multi-million-dollar contracts for the rest of their career.
It's all about money, and all about you're talking. It was all bullshit. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
BS. But it's all you're talking about something that's so contrived and and people took out of context so badly, and you're talking about the vehicle itself. The vehicle itself slowed down to 11 miles an hour and veered over to the left, cutting off the motorcycle guy. And if you look at the Zapruder film, you'll see the Secret Service guys peel back away from the car before the shooting, and then all of a sudden they all ran up forward. So now Zapruder himself was a white Russian who came into New York with his partner, and they were given $250,000 to go to start the clothing industry in Texas. All the elements involved, Ruby and everything, if you look at all the pieces and put it together, it all makes sense. The Byrd building was owned by H.L. Hunt. Okay?
Yeah.
So, and you got a window upstairs on the 3rd floor where all the windows are open, people are walking around, and you have the President of the United States in an open car down below you. It never happened in our lifetime. And then you have all these people coming off a train, walking over a bridge, all these hobos, one of them being Woody Harrelson's father, who was a hitter for New Orleans.
And what about E. Howard Hunt?
What about him?
Do you think he was one of the hobos?
There were 32 people at Dealey Plaza that day that had the ability to assassinate somebody. There were 13 shots fired. And there's Zapruder, who never had a camera in his hands before in his life, taking this footage with 2 women holding his legs because he suffered from vertigo.
Back to the shooters for a second. Frank Fiorini, was he there?
Who?
Frank Fiorini.
He was claimed to have been there.
Oh, Frank Sturgis, you know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah, I know you're talking about. But there were 32 people there that day that could have taken shots at people. Okay? So it was a lot of chaos. And they created that chaos for a reason. And so the whole thing is, and every couple of years more information comes out. Just like the 3rd shot that hit Kennedy in the back. And the way that the whole thing happened, Conolly got shot first. Kennedy gets shot in the throat. You see him reach up and grab his neck, and he falls forward. And then all of a sudden he goes shooting backwards, and the back of his head flies out. Yeah?
And Conolly said, they're going to kill us all.
Well, not only that, but Jackie is trying to get out of the car,
right.
And they said no, she was trying to scrape his brains back. That's bullshit. She thought she was getting killed too. So she tried to get out of the car, and when she got out, they whispered in her ear, if you open your mouth and say one thing about anything you just witnessed, your children die. And she never said a word.
Yeah, I know. You don't even hear a recording of her voice after that. There was just
never said a word.
Just the conversation of her with Johnson on his tape recordings in the White House. But otherwise, you never really hear a recording of her voice after that time.
Well, there was an article. There was a discussion on the plane, and we won't even go into that. It's just the whole thing was a travesty. The people who did the autopsy in Texas were interns. That's all come out. The body was rushed out of. Now, here's the kicker for you, though. Here's something for you to think about. Who was the number one cop in the country when Jack Kennedy got killed?
What's his name? His brother, Bobby.
Yeah, he was the attorney general.
Yeah.
And his brother Bobby was his second skin everywhere Jack went in his political career. And 4 people went to see him prior to Jack going to Texas, one of them being Adlai Stevenson, and said to him, do not let your brother go to Texas. The animosity is horrendous. Okay? Horrendous. Don't let him go. People are spitting at me in Houston, Texas, he said. So, Bobby Kennedy wasn't there before. He wasn't there during, and he never went there afterwards. Think he knew his brother wasn't coming home?
So your theory is that his father orchestrated this?
I think it was done because of what he did to people. I think it was first of all, you got to look at the first son was killed in a plane crash. Right. Yeah. Okay, so look at the whole scenario of the plane crash. They're going to build a plane out of England. They're building a plane like a kamikaze plane to fly into the munition factories of Germany. Yeah? And Joe Kennedy was picked as the pilot to test pilot it because he was a great pilot. But here he is already mustered out of the service. He had 11 days to go before he's home. And they talked him into test piloting this plane. Yeah? And he goes up and test pilots a plane. The plane crashes. Boom, he's dead. 11 days later, they scrubbed the whole deal. Like it never was there. That's first son dead. Second son dies, Jack Kennedy. Third son dies, Bobby Kennedy. Teddy Kennedy was disgraced because they said in New York, another Kennedy will never walk across the threshold of the White House again. That was a known fact.
And then the grandson, John Jr., dies in a plane crash as well.
Died, and that was his own fault because he was taking his mother's diary and coming to Hollywood to make a movie.
This theory of the father, being involved. There is a movie about that, Winter Kills, with Bridges. You ever see that one?
No.
Okay, that's an interesting one. You might want to take a look at that. That's interesting.
About who being involved in what? About
Kennedy's. Well, it's not. They don't mention it. They don't use the name Kennedy, but it's obvious it's by Kennedy. They even talk about the Colonel. Who was the Colonel?
You talking about Joe Kennedy?
No, General Walker. General Walker's in this film too.
Yeah,
General Walker's in it. It's an interesting film. It's called Winter Kills. You can find it online. I'll send you. I don't have your email, but I'll send you a link. It's along these lines here.
There's a dozen books have been written. Most of them tell you nothing. They spin around the block. Nobody wants to ever look at the truth. People avoid the truth like a plague. But Joe Kennedy came out here to Hollywood when Jack Kennedy was being nominated. Yeah? Okay. He came out with a suitcase full of money, gave it to H.L. Hunt so that Johnson gave Joe Kennedy a suitcase full of money so that Johnson would become vice president on that ticket. Yeah? Lyndon Johnson becomes vice president. Now, the first question that Meyer Lansky asked was, what are you going to do with that person, Bobby, who was already disturbing a lot of things? And the old man said, we're going to make him ambassador to Ireland. He's going to leave the country. Well, he became attorney general. So when Jack Kennedy, whom, if you ever followed the whole political situation, the nomination, his father said he had all these electoral votes, which he never had in his pocket. So he called Giancana after the second day and he said, we got a problem. And Sam said, well, you told me you had this all covered. Well, guess what? We need help. So the state of Illinois, for the very first time, went Democrat, and 2 other states around it. Yeah? And they got their votes. Now, there was only one state left that could ever put him across the finish line. It was the state of West Virginia. So they called and they begged again for help. So some phone calls were made. because there were a lot of casinos in West Virginia at that time because of the money that was there, because of the coal industry and everything. And some debt was excused, and West Virginia raised their hand, Democrat, and the votes went, the electoral votes went to Kennedy, put him across the line, got him nominated for president. Now he's running for president, and the election is very, very close. So they call Sam Giancana again. There were people in Cicero, Illinois, that voted 50 times, and they were dead. And Jack Kennedy becomes president of the United States. And his father turns around and says to him, make your brother attorney general. And he tells his son Bobby, he said, put all my good friends in jail. And they went after Giancana, they went after Hoffa, they went after everybody.
Do you know what happened to Hoffa?
Well, you're never going to find him in a grave, I'll tell you that.
What about that book, I Heard You Paint Houses? What do you think?
Like I said, you're never going to find him in a grave. And Jimmy was. I love Jimmy Hoffa, but he was his own worst enemy. Jimmy put himself into a position where, first of all, what they charged him with was ludicrous. Saying that he took $8,000 out of the Teamster funds to fix his house when there was no pension without Hoffa. He didn't have to rob $8,000 out of the pension fund to fix anything. All the charges against him were so trumped up, it was pathetic. Okay? So, and when he went to jail, he thought he was only going in there for 30 days or something. And they were destined to keep him there, because they infiltrated the Teamsters, the government. And Fitzgerald was weak. You understand me?
Yeah.
And when Jimmy made the deal to come home, he came home. He walked into the office and he told Fitzsimmons to get out of his chair. And Fitzsimmons said, "Whoa, man, you can't do this, Jimmy. You signed the deal. You're not allowed to come around here for so many years. You're going to get us all locked up." He said, "Get out of my office. I'm taking my union back. This union belongs to me." And then he made a phone call to New York. And he talked to a very serious person in New York. And the guy said, "Jimmy, you're on the phone." He said, "I don't care. I want my union back. This, that. The guy said, "Jimmy, you're on the phone. Have patience. It'll all work out. Don't tell me this. When you people wanted money, you came to me. We let you all the money out of the pension funds, and every one of those loans were paid back. They put up $25 million for Caesar's Palace, a few other things, but every dime was paid back." So the guy said, "Jimmy, you're on the phone, and just have some patience." And Jimmy made the worst statement he ever made in his life. He said, "I'll go to the newspapers." The guy hung up in New York, and that was the end of Jimmy Hoffa. You understand?
Yeah.
But nobody looks at the seriousness or things of where simplicity happens. Nobody ever looked at how Vegas was built, where it came from.
We're bouncing around a little bit here, but I want to ask you this. Mr. Trump, right? Mr. Trump, the President of the United States.
I like.
You like him, okay? But the thing is, widely, a lot of connections back in New York. What do you know about that?
What's the difference? The guy is. Let me tell you something. He's only the second man to ever take the presidency that didn't borrow a dime. In other words, he did not owe one favor to anybody. And I'll tell you, Michael Moore made a great statement. You know how crazy radical Michael Moore is, right? Michael Moore was at a meeting with Trump before he was elected in Detroit with all the motor guys, all the automobile industry people. And they were having this big meeting. And Donald Trump stood up in the middle of the meeting and he said, "Gentlemen, if you build one more factory outside of this country, if you take one more automotive job away from this country, when I get elected, I will put a tariff of 35% on every vehicle brought back into the country." Because they had taken billions of dollars during the Obama thing, paid off all their debts and everything, and then moved the industry out of the country. No one ever talks about that, though, do they? You understand? Mike Moore jumped up and he said, "You just got my vote." because he had the guts to stand up in front of these people and make a statement just like that. Because you can't buy him. And that disturbs, Donald Trump becoming president was the biggest kick that George Soros ever got in his life. Because all these deals were made with Hillary and everybody else that this was going to be done, this was going to be done, that was going to be done. All those deals fell apart. All the foreign countries that put money into something that they thought they were going to get favors for, those favors aren't there to be had. No one's that. All they want to do is let the media chastise this guy and try and tear him apart. Give the man a chance to breathe and look at what he does for the country. If he doesn't bring America back, which needs to happen, Americans need to take America back. We need to stand up and take our country back.
What about?
Does that make any sense?
Yeah. What about Roy Cohn? You ever come into contact with him?
What about him?
Did you come into contact with him?
Yeah. What about him?
Oh, well, what do you know about him?
He was what he was,
Okay.
He was. He answered to people like a lot of people did. He was not a single power of his own. Trust me.
Right.
People got things taken out of context, and people take things out of context. And it's just it's the same as Bugsy Siegel being killed in Nevada. And I mean in Beverly Hills, and everybody's going, well, who killed Bugsy Siegel? Well, this guy, that guy. Bugsy Siegel was killed by a guy from New York, and it was from the Murder Incorporated crew. I know exactly who killed Bugsy Siegel and why he killed him.
Well, why did he kill him?
Because he got out of line. He did something he should never have done. He went against the rules of the families. And the guy that he insulted the most was his dearest friend, Meyer Lansky. He wouldn't stop doing what he was doing. He wanted to be a movie star. He wanted to do this. He wanted to do that. They stole money out of the Vegas thing, and there were things you just don't do. And he was told to stop, and he didn't. He thought he became a power of his own because he was away from New York. He was out in the West Coast, so Frankie Carbo killed him.
I'm bouncing around a little bit here, but I got a lot of notes while you were talking before. Back to Dallas for a second. Do you know anything about when Oswald ran to that movie theater?
Oswald, here, let me tell you something. Let me explain something to you. And I had a writer do this walk, all right? From the Byrd Building to the place where the cop got killed, Tippit, to his house to the movie theater. Time frame wise, never happened. Could never happen. So Oswald wasn't even in the building when the shots were fired. He was already gone. The lies that were told when the FBI went over to the prison and the guy said, we saw 3 people in that window. They said, don't you ever say that or make that statement or anything. They went to the neighbors at Oswald's house and they made the people lie. Yeah? So Oswald went to a movie theater and was arrested. Yeah? And here's the fun part. He gets arrested for killing the president of the United States, supposedly. All right?
Yeah.
And the FBI don't get involved because they say, well, it wasn't a conspiracy. It was a lone gunman. We can't get involved in this. And they never took one note, never took one recording of any of the questionings they did with Oswald. There's not a note. There's not a recording. And when you see Oswald come out of that building with the sheriff, the guy steps aside from him because he saw Ruby coming and he knew he was getting shot.
Yeah, if you ever see that scene where the cop in the big white suit with the white hat, if that guy didn't know, he was holding him up, man.
Look at the look in his face.
Yeah. He knew that was coming. He doesn't.
And what is Ruby doing? What is Ruby doing allowed in there with a gun?
Well, what do you know about Ruby? What can you tell us about Ruby?
Jack Ruby came from Chicago. He ran some places in Chicago for the mob. He ran what they call the punch board business from New York to Chicago. It was a numbers thing. We punched the hole in the thing. He had punch boards. A guy got killed in his club. They had sent his sister to Dallas a year before to open up a restaurant. And Ruby went to Dallas when they sent him from Chicago to Dallas, and he became the liaison between Cuba and Florida. He ran back and forth carrying messages. Okay?
Okay.
So he was totally controlled by Chicago. And in fact, when they went in with the Warren Commission to question Ruby, the very first thing he said to them was, well, I guess you guys want to talk about Chicago. And they said, no. He said, well, you can't talk to me here. You got to get me out of this town because this is not safe. And they put him in jail, and 6 months later he died because he got shot with a needle from Tulane University. Cancer. See you. Bye. Like several other people I know.
Well, you've heard of people getting shot up with cancer before?
Well, you think John Gotti was ever sick a day in his life? All of a sudden he dies of cancer? Two friends of mine from Massachusetts, same thing.
Being from California, right?
I'm not from California.
Well, you're in California right now, right?
I live here, yeah.
Yeah, okay. I'm living in California. And you've lived there for how long?
On and off since the 60s.
Okay.
I lived in Europe for 20 years. I lived all over the place.
What, have you run across Anthony Pellicano?
Yeah, I knew Anthony was.
Okay. What can you tell us about Anthony Pellicano?
He ran a little agency like your detective agency there, you know?
Well, not like mine, but okay, but like I don't have any C4
He
in my
ran a
safe.
detective agency in Beverly Hills,
Right.
And he stepped out of bounds.
Yeah.
He stepped out of bounds, man. You know, he did things he was not supposed to do. Again, over greed. Everything's about greed, man. I saw him in his office about 2 weeks before all that shebang opened up. Anthony.
No, he must have had some kind of CIA connections or something like that, right? You familiar with that?
But they all had. You got to understand something. When the CIA was formed in the 40s, yeah?
Okay.
And you got to understand how many versions of the CIA there are. There's like 58 different chapters of the CIA. And they're not funded by the government. They weren't for years. Okay? Private funding. And when Anthony, most people, like I say, in the 40s when they were started, there were certain things that the CIA could not do. They were not. There was no white people allowed in China other than Sam Giancana, who was friendly with Shanghai Shek, and he was one of the only white guys that they allowed over there. So the CIA went into China and took care of business and things that Murder Incorporated sent guys over there that they couldn't do. The CIA couldn't get into. You know what I mean?
Same thing with Cuba too, right? Well, what do you know about the?
Cuba was the whole Cuban thing. Here's Joe Kennedy tells his son, all those soldiers going into the Bay of Pigs do not need any ammunition in their weapon because if one of them shoots a shot off, it's going to create chaos. So what happens? They all go into that water with weapons with no ammunition, and they all get slaughtered. Slaughtered. There were 11 guys that came out of that thing that joined Johnson. He became Johnson's private little army. I had a good friend of mine from Tallahassee who was involved in that. One of the survivors. So you can't, like I said, the media takes everything out of context. People's stories take everything out of context. Everybody wants to cover up this, cover up that, cover up. But there's a truth that always surfaces years later.
And why do you think it is that the media covers up so much?
Because they're owned.
By the government?
Do you think that the media, when you sit there and you're watching the news every day at 6 o'clock, you think you're hearing the truth? You got to be kidding me. The news on television is there to make awards. They're trying to win awards. They don't care what they tell you. They tell you what they want to tell you. They don't tell you what's actually going on in the world.
And in control by who? The government or?
You ever hear that story that money talks and BS walks?
Right. Okay.
So how much control do you think George Soros has over the media? He owns Fox News. He owns a lot of things.
Soros owns Fox News?
In the back door.
Well, okay. Well, Trump and Jared Kushner, they both did business with Soros.
A lot of people did business with Soros because they know everybody gets blindsided in a lot of places. Everybody. It's hard to believe that certain things can be a reality right in front of your face. Our country. Okay, let me say something. Let me ask you a question.
Okay.
What was the very first prohibition in America?
Ooh, marijuana?
No.
What was it?
No. In 1914, they had a thing called the Harrison Act. The Harrison Act, before the Harrison Act, you could walk into a pharmacy, you could buy opium across the counter.
Yeah, I was going to guess
you could buy marijuana across the counter.
Yeah.
And there was no addictions anywhere. You understand? Now the Harrison Act comes into play, which gave Big Pharma all their control. All of a sudden, the pharmaceutical business is all controlled by money. Okay? Now you take a look at our society, and you say, okay, in the 1900s, early 1900s, all the way up past 1914. In that whole era, housewives were housewives. They stayed home. They had 6, 7, 8 children. If they were married to an abusive drunk or something, there was no such thing as divorce. People stayed married. So doctors, after 14, doctors handed out prescriptions like candy. They gave women speed to wake up in the morning and Valium to go to bed at night. Now, all those drugs are going through their blood system, which means that a children being born, that blood's going through that child. And children are being born with addictions. No one ever talks about that. In 1972, they made a documentary called The Little Junkie out of a major hospital in New York.
Yeah.
And it was kids that were being born screaming, crying, uncontrollable. Doctors couldn't believe what was going on with these kids until one bright doctor turned around and said, these kids are going through withdrawal. Their mothers are junkies. It was shown once on television. No one ever saw it again.
I remember that. Now, you mentioned earlier Adnan Khashoggi.
You're an investigator. You should know all these things.
No, I remember that show. I know, but listen, I can tell you, we do shows on this stuff all the time. Okay, as a matter of fact, you may not be aware of this, but you know that the Operation Paperclip, right? They brought in the Nazis to work on a space program. The Nazis they brought in too are the ones who started the Food and Drug Administration here in this country. Okay, that's a whole other.
Why don't they have a discussion about 9/11, about the school in Florida that taught when guys walked into the air schools and with a case full of money and said, "I want to learn the airspace. I don't want to learn how to take off or land. I just want to know the navigation of the airspace." And no one said a word about it?
Oh, no, yeah. Daniel Hopsick, I've had him on the show many times.
Please, give me a break.
Check out his work on that. Hey, but what can you tell us about Adnan Khashoggi? You mentioned him before. What do you know about his dealings and dabblings here in the United States?
Lived on a boat all his life because he never sat down on the ground. No one could ever lock him up. He lived in international waters. He did more weapon deals than any man walking the face of the earth.
And drug deals?
Did them all.
Okay.
But you see, things went into certain monies, and you're talking about drugs. Listen. In 1957, 56, if you go on your computer and you go back in the banking history of the banks, the four major banks of New York, and look at what they were doing loan-wise internationally, you will find that they were lending huge sums of money to South America for so-called agricultural loans. Yeah? 1960, America's going through certain changes. They go off of the gold standard on the bank notes. They had the Hoffa problem. Kennedy was running for president, first Irish Catholic president. There were four different issues. The unions were up in rise in Northeast, with all kinds of problems going on in the country, right? So when the bank is changing over from one system to the other, some bright sparks in the bank said, hey, guys, there's a whole bunch of debt on our books that nobody's talking about. We're not seeing any money return. What are we doing about this? And some bright spark by the name of George Bush, who was a CIA guy, said, don't worry about that. Everything will even out. There's something we can get our money back from in South America. Thing called cocaine. And Noriega and some people went into the drug business, the government. By 1963, all those banks were overflowing with money, and nobody asked where it came from. So you had one bank in New York said, geez, you know what? I think we got a problem here. We seem to have a lot of money. So they gave up a matchbook and kept the box. You understand?
No.
And this country went in the cocaine business.
Right.
And Noriega was a big part of that. And Noriega went to school at Yale with a guy called George Bush. Nobody talks about that, though, do they?
And whatever happened to Noriega? Is he still alive?
He's in jail, living like a king.
Yeah, I think he was in the same prison there as Gotti for a while.
In jail, living like a king.
Yeah.
Got a television. He's got he's got his own safe in his jail cell. Everything.
Jack, we're coming toward the end of the show. First of all, is there anything I haven't asked you that you'd like to tell us about?
People should buy my book. They'll like it.
Yeah, family legacy. You
got 3 more books coming. It's going to be good. We're telling the truth about some things in this country which need to be told.
FamilyLegacyTheNovel.com. So, and what the next books? What are they going to be about?
It'll be the sequels to Family Legacy, going before and after. You got to go back all the way back to 1850 when they first came in the country. First place they came in was down in New Orleans because it was the biggest shipping port. And they set up in the country. If you look at how the Italians set up when they came in the country, it was like the Roman legions. They set up at all the shipping ports, states on the East Coast, all the way up to Detroit on the Canadian border. And then they set up in Chicago, which was the turnstile for trafficking in America. Like Roman legions. That's why they have soldiers and capos and lieutenants and,
Where does the book Family Legacy leave off? Like what year?
It starts with my father's death and ends with Kennedy's death.
Kennedy's death. Okay.
And I tell the truth about the Kennedy assassination.
So then you have a lot to cover. Do you talk about
then the next book will go from Kennedy's death to Nixon's impeachment, and then we'll go from there to modern day, and then we're going to do a book infiltrating how Europe and America are all interfaced and banking systems. And
now, in your
research, Lansky taught me when I was a kid. He said, "Always follow the money, kid."
Now, to your knowledge, do you have any information about people involved in the Kennedy assassination being involved in Watergate?
Being involved in what?
Watergate.
2 different scenarios.
Okay.
2 different scenarios. We're talking about 2 different political stances altogether. Watergate was if you got to look at Richard Nixon's history, where he came from. Understand that he was one of the first people in China. He and Kissinger, when they made the deals over there. Nobody knows when he was vice president of the United States. People forget about certain things.
What do you know about blackmail? Blackmail and compromising political officials and stuff like that. Stuff like the Franklin cover-up. And well, go ahead, man. What do you know? Go ahead, man. We only got about 6 minutes, but what can you tell us?
What do you know about blackmail?
Yeah.
Go all the way back. Go all the way back. All the way back to the beginning, man. Blackmail is part of society's. It's like wearing your coats and clothes. It's a way of life. People have skullduggery and turned on people on every day. Look at your society, man. Look at the changes in our society. How old are you?
55.
Okay. When you were a kid, you were raised in New York. What part of New York were you raised in?
I was born in the Bronx first in Staten Island.
Okay. So Staten Island was a good place. I had a lot
yeah.
of good friends over there.
Yeah.
I like Staten Island. But when you lived in Staten Island, nobody ever locked their front door.
No, that's true. I have. You know, I still don't lock my front door. My whole life.
Listen to what I'm telling you.
Yeah.
You didn't lock your front door. I lived in Philadelphia. I was raised in Philadelphia. The neighborhood that I was raised in, you wouldn't even go into today. But when I was a kid, nobody locked their front door. People used to stay outside on cots in the summertime because no one had air conditioning. You understand? People slept in their own backyards. Nobody ever bothered anybody. Kids went in the streets. When I was a kid, we went out at sunrise and came back at sunset. Played all day long out in the streets without any problems. You never had any drive-by shootings. Neighborhoods were protected and taken care of because they were sources of revenue. You have a country that our first biggest problem came when we put welfare in place. And Roosevelt stood up and said it shouldn't happen because he said, if you want money from me, do a job, collect trash, fix the streets, do something. Don't sit at home and just expect me to give you a check. No one ever explored the whole welfare system, how it was exploited from day one. And what did it? It put socialism in the middle of a democracy because neighbors stopped talking to each other. The government was taking care of them. They didn't need their neighbor any longer. They went to the government for their needs. Does that make any sense to you?
Well, I understand what you're saying, but we're down to the last couple of minutes. Is that really what you want to leave us with?
Listen, what I would literally like to leave us with, I'd love to see Americans stand up and take their country back.
Right.
I really would love to see that happen in my lifetime.
Okay.
Truly.
Jack Halloran, thank you so much, my friend, okay? I really appreciate you giving me this extra time today. The book is called Family Legacy, and you can find his book at familylegacythenovel.com. Jack, as soon as you have something new come up, okay? If you want to come back, give me a call, I'll put you right on the air.
So when we come to Vegas, you buying dinner or what?
I don't know. I can't even afford dinner for myself, man. We have to go to a drive-thru. Wait, the other problem is, Jack, I'm a vegan now. Okay, I'm vegan. I don't eat no meat, no cheese, no nothing. I don't think we could eat at the same table.
Have mercy.
God bless you, Jack. Thank you so much.
Take care, man. Do
Good
well.
Okay, there you got Jack O'Halloran. Boxer, actor, JFK enthusiast. Good old Jack Halloran. Oh, boy. Okay, listen. Thank you so much. If you enjoyed this show, and I think there's some good content in there. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to check out OppermanReport.com. And what we have there at OppermanReport.com is our member section. And you go to the member section, and there's all kinds of exclusive content that you won't hear on Friday or Saturday or Sundays that you'll only find in the members section. Exclusive content, exclusive documents, exclusive interviews, pictures. Oh, I got pictures of when I used to be a Chippendales dancer. You go and become a member at OperaReport.com, you find my Chippendales photos. Okay, what a long day. We got some great content coming up. I have a guest who is a member of Men Going Their Own Way, which is a new phenomenon going on in this really around the world of men that are giving up relationships with women. They don't want to get married. They don't want to have girlfriends. Some travel a monastic lifestyle, and others only use prostitutes. Men going their own way. We have that coming up. I have coming up too. We're going to be doing a show about Assata Shakur, who is the mother of Tupac Shakur. And involved in the revolutionary work back in the 60s and 70s. She's down in Cuba today. Let's see, what else? A lot of great stuff I'm working on. Oh, I got a show coming up in the member section with Barry Prince interviewed me. I have another episode going up where Sherry Wisdom interviews me, where I talk about the origin of the whole Stormy Daniels case and how my personal agent, and an attorney I've worked with is involved in that whole thing. I'll give you some inside information. You can find that in the OppermanReport.com. Thank you so much. Remember, all these shows on Awake are brought to you by emailrevealer.com. You can go to emailrevealer.com and get a copy of my book, How to Become a Successful Private Investigator. But you also do all the kind of different services for you. An online dating service investigation. It's called an online infidelity investigation. And that's where you give us your husband or your boyfriend, your girlfriend's email address, and we trace it back to their online dating websites, and we return a list of all the dating sites that email is registered to. We can expand on that investigation and trace it back to porn sites, escort service sites, swinger sites, even gambling websites, and even prescription drug websites. If you think your ex-husband or something is addicted to prescription medication or involved in a extreme online pornography addiction, we can produce a report for you that you can use in court. Adoption investigations. If you want to locate your birth parents or your birth child you gave away for adoption, we can do adoption investigations for you. Asset searches for you. Locate bank accounts, hidden assets, hidden properties, hidden income, all different kinds of services in the asset search investigation. Email tracing. If you need to locate or identify somebody from just an email address, we can do an email trace investigation for you, and all kinds of digital forensics, computer and cell phone digital forensics, where we can recover deleted content from an email or a hard drive and produce a report for you that you can use in court. That's emailrevealer.com, or you can contact me at oppermaninvestigations@gmail.com.